we are describing it as an offensive, I would probably say it's an offensive, not a counteroffensive, because for most of the front line, the Russians actually been quite passive. That would probably witness in the early stages of it, because the scale and the level of little firepower that's been employed is certainly limited with respect to the ambition that the Ukrainian political military leadership was showing before, in terms of achieving significant territorial gains, liberating most of areas captured by the Russians, and perhaps even charging on the Crimea. So I think at this point in time, the Ukrainians are probing Russian defenses, trying to find weaknesses, something that they've been doing over the past 2 weeks. But what they have done right now is effectively up the scale by moving from small tactical formations into larger formations, battalion size, brigade size. But I would certainly would describe it as probably preliminary stage rather than the major phase of the offensive.
Okay, so what can we expect then from a proper offensive when that comes?
Look, I mean, the Ukrainians obviously need to bring in more. There are two principal challenges that they're facing right now. First of all, Russia has air dominance. Ukraine cannot probably back its advancing forces by sufficient air support. And by that, they're making themselves vulnerable and susceptible to Russia's air attacks. And also, Ukraine doesn't have superior artillery firepower. Yes, they're trying to mass some of their artillery systems in areas where they believe they may have probably most progress. But for now, the Russians certainly overwhelm them with firepower, and that would create more difficulties for the Ukrainians, regardless of how brave, determined, and courageous they're going to be, because at the end of the day, if you have means to keep your enemy at distance, and certainly the Russians seem to display this capability, any tactical successes that you may gain, as for example an advancing force, which also carries the risk of sustaining higher fatalities than the defending force, it's just basic operational science maths. Then obviously it would come at a significant cost to you, with questions whether you can actually meet the targets that you would set for yourself. And obviously President Zelensky was declaring pretty ambitious targets, as I was mentioning to you a bit earlier.
Australia's Hawkeye armoured cars are reportedly bound for Ukraine in a new assistance deal. What will be the impact of more military equipment from the West?
Well, it would make a difference, but again, we should not expect them to become one of those wonder weapons that all of a sudden change the pace of the conflict, because, as I said before, in the absence of formidable air power, air support, and air defense, the Ukrainian forces will be vulnerable, regardless what sort of advanced armor or advanced artillery systems or up-to-date intelligence they will command. They need those air capabilities, without which you cannot really fight successful modern military campaign, especially against the enemy that displays pretty formidable capabilities. And as some intelligence reports suggested, the Russians haven't fully utilized the air power potential that they can deploy across the theater. According to some British intelligence report, the Russians only rely on 5% of the entire air power, meaning that they're reserving their capability in anticipation of the Ukrainian main phase assault, and then we will see how things will play out.